We're now going to take a look at the loadSearches method, and this is going to do actually two things. One is if the user has not been to this web page previously during the current browsing session, then we're going to display a welcome message. And if they have been to the page previously, then we won't. And then separately, we're going to load the previously stored key value pairs that represent the tags for each search and the corresponding search query. So let's take a look starting at line 19 through line 24, where we have our if statement that uses the session storage object of the browser window to determine whether the user has been to this page previously. Now you're going to see here that we're referring to the session storage object explicitly through the window object here in the if condition and implicitly through the window object here at line 21. Generally, the methods and properties of the window object can be accessed without saying window dot in front of their name. So when I say window.sessionStorage, this gives me access to an object that stores key value pairs only for the duration of the current browsing session, and that could be an individual tab in a multi-tab browser, or it could be the entire browser window itself. And then within that object, I have key value pairs, one of which is going to be called here previously if the user had previously visited the page. If I call getItem with here previously as an argument and it returns null, it means the user has not been here previously, in which case I want to perform the body of this if statement. Otherwise, if it returns a non-null value, the condition will be false, and I'll jump down to line 26. Now, if the condition is true, I will define here previously to be the value true, and I will set that item in the session storage object. And then at line 22, I will say to my document, give me the element called welcome message, and change the HTML inside of that element, which is the purpose of the inner HTML property, to the string welcome to the favorite Twitter searches app. And the highlighted piece here, because I'm setting the inner HTML property, may contain HTML markup as well that would then be interpreted by the browser to format the content that appears within that element. Now let's move on to loading the actual key value pairs that we hope will be stored beyond this current browsing session, and that's the purpose of the local storage object. Now, the local storage object is actually shared by all apps from a given website. So we're assuming in this case that the only app coming from the website is going to be our favorite Twitter searches app, and we're just storing key value pairs directly within the local storage object. When you have many apps being deployed from a given website, then what you might do is for each individual app, you would have one key value pair, which is a key representing the app, and a value, which is an object of key value pairs specific to that particular app. And then you would use just that one object to read in the values for that given app. So here we are getting the length of the local storage object, which is the number of key value pairs stored in that object, and we're assigning to our script level variable tags an empty array, and this is shorthand notation for creating an array in JavaScript. Then at lines 30 through 33, we have a pretty standard looking for loop where our counter is the variable I starting at 0 as long as I is less than the length of the local storage object. And for each of the keys in the local storage object, we're going to take the key and place it into the tags array at the same position. So the key method of the local storage object for the index I will get us the key at that index, and then we'll store it. Once we have all the keys, we call the built-in array method sort to sort those keys. Now, by default, the sort method uses the letters in your strings to do the sorting, and because lowercase letters have higher values than uppercase letters, that can affect your sorting order. And we wanted to do a case insensitive sort. So we're passing as an argument to the sort function a anonymous function in JavaScript that's going to perform the comparison of the two values being sorted. So the two values are going to be called string1 and string2, and the sort method will automatically pass in the elements to determine the sorting order. Then we define a local variable comparison result and set it to 0, and we get the uppercase versions of both of the strings. So we're going to compare the two strings based on all uppercase letters. Once we do that, we check to see if the first string is greater than the second string. If it is, we set comparison result to 1. Then we check to see if the string 1 is less than string 2, in which case we set the comparison result to -1. If it's neither greater than nor less than, then they must be equal, in which case the comparison result will still be 0. And the requirement for this anonymous function that we're defining here is that it has to return a positive number if the first parameter's value is greater than the second, 0 if they're equal, and a negative value if the first parameter's value is less than the second. So we're going to be returning 0 if they're equal, 1 if the first is greater, and -1 if the first is less. Then at line 48 we see the return value, and the sort method uses this anonymous function to help determine the sort order. Regardless of what we're doing here, after lines 35 through 50 execute, we will have a sorted list of tags, and that's important because, as you can see here, the tag names are being displayed in the page in alphabetical order, regardless of case. So if I go and add another tag in here that starts with IPH, let's just do that. You can see that it shows up where it should in the list of searches. The next thing we do at lines 52 through the end of this method is build the markup that represents the unordered list of tags and the images that represent editing and deleting a given search. So we create a variable called markup and assign it the string ul in angle brackets, which is the start of an unordered list element. We also define the variable URL, which is the beginning of the URL for a Twitter search. Then at line 56 through 64 we have a for each loop, if you will. And basically for every tag in the array called tags, we're going to create a query, which is the URL that's defined up here, plus the result of local storage.getItem, and tags subtag is going to pick off the value for a given tag. And the value for a given tag is the search that we're going to be performing. So to the right of q equals in the URL is the search string. Then at line 59 we add to the end of our markup a list item that consists of a hyperlink containing that query URL, followed by the tag that's going to be displayed as the shorthand name of the search. And then the end of the anchor element defines the end of the hyperlink. And we follow that with two image elements, and for each one the ID is the tag that we're defining. The source is either the edit PNG file or the delete PNG file, and we also define an alt attribute in each case. Alt equals and then edit search, or alt equals and then delete search. And then the most important part for these is the onClick attribute, which says what to do when the click event occurs for these images. So if the user touches the image, then we want to perform a task. And in the first case, we're going to call the edit tag method, passing in the ID value as an argument so it knows which of the different searches we wanted to edit. And in the delete image button case, it's going to call delete tag with the ID as an argument so it knows which one to delete from the local storage object. Now you'll notice that we used onClick to register the events here, which is the kind of older way of registering event handlers in HTML and JavaScript. In the earlier part of this lesson, when we first introduced the JavaScript, we went to the end of this file and we showed you using add event listener. We also did that back up here in the start method with add event listener, which is the most modern way, if you will, of registering an event listener. It's just that in terms of generating markup on the fly, it's a little bit easier to register event listeners the way I'm showing here. After that, we end the unordered list that was started up above, and then we say to the document, get the element with the ID searches, which was the div element at the bottom of our web page, and set its inner HTML to this markup variable, which is all of the markup that we generated up above, and then it causes the browser to interpret that markup along with the CSS styles for the different elements within this markup, and that results in us getting this every other blue, every other yellow layout for the unordered list of previously saved searches.